Welcome to the Sounds of the World. We are your hosts, Hillary and Bill.
Together, we're going to travel around the world to discover new music, discuss musical topics, and interview fascinating people.
Our world is a buffet of music, and it is time to eat. All right, welcome back, everybody. That was a brief sample of Home Away from Home by our next guest. The composer comes from Kyiv, Ukraine, but currently lives in Brisbane, Australia. She received her bachelor's degree in jazz piano from the Kyiv Gliere University and a post-degree in music composition from the Kyiv Conservatory. She has since gone on and recently finished her PhD at the University of Queensland. Her music has been performed all over the world, including Canada, the US, Brazil, Europe, and Australia. She's also a performer, including on the premiere of her CD recording of Out Loud, her piano concerto commissioned by the Cornell University Wind Ensemble. She's performed with numerous collaborators on some of the biggest stages, including the World Saxophone Congress, twice at the International Horn Symposium, Eastman, Northwestern, and University of Michigan. Today we're going to be talking about her life, her music, inspirations, and the world of wind band literature. We hope to find out more about her Ukrainian past and how it influences her music as well. Please welcome Dr. Catherine Likhuta.
Woo!
Woo!
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
It's great to talk to you. I remember you were coming for the TMEA conference a year ago or 2 years ago, and I wanted to try and meet up with you there, like see you and kind of just meet you, and unfortunately things fell through, but it was so cool to think, oh, here's this composer who's really making some big waves and I can have a chance to meet her.
Well, now we can meet. Everybody can meet in Zoom.
Exactly.
Year of meetings online.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you for your interest in my music.
Oh, it's great. Yeah, we've been listening to it, and Hillary and I both have different favorites, and I think that's what's great, is that we can all have all these great favorites. So yeah, I don't want to have a bolero, bolero situation. Exactly.
I really enjoy it. Yeah, quite often, I would play a recital when I do a bit of touring with my chamber music. Mostly it's music for horn and piano. I do some touring in the US with my collaborators from there, and then I would go and chat to audience members afterwards, and different people would tell me their favorites on the recital, and it's always that different people talk about different pieces, and I really enjoy it because, as much as I can have my own favorite, but they're all my babies, these pieces, and I want them. There is something for me in all of that. In each of them, there is something different to like, and so I really enjoy it when different audience members relate to different pieces.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's such a huge compliment too, when people aren't just like, "Oh, it was great. I really liked that one at the end." It's such a refreshing thing as a composer to be like, "You liked it? Okay, which one did you? Oh, you liked a different one." Like it's cool. It's such a good compliment, and really speaks to your diverse style. And I mean, I was listening to your SoundCloud, a couple of offerings that you have on there, and I was like, "Ooh, I like this one. I like this one. I like this one."
Thank you.
Really
Thank
fun.
you. Yeah, they all kind of tell different little stories, if you will, and so it depends on which story you like better and which kind of characters, musical characters, speak to you the most.
Oh yeah. So we talked about a little bit with the Kyiv universities and stuff, but let's maybe explore your musical background a little bit.
Yeah, it goes back to before I was born. I basically, like I told you, it was Likhuta. There are no short answers. I was, yeah, so I was basically born in a family of musicians on both sides. On my mom's side, we had choral conductors, and my mom's dad was a jazz saxophonist, and he played saxophone, clarinet, all the reed instruments pretty much, and he was a director of a concert band as well. In Ukraine it was different setting, but they played mostly at big hotel receptions and things like that, but they toured all across the Soviet Union as well. That was before I was born. And on my dad's side we had jazz and jazz rock percussionists. So when I was born I didn't have much choice really but to do something in music, because I had all this in my genes. It was kind of I don't know how to put it, but it was kind of the valuables that I got from my family, you know, and I showed, I guess, talent, if you listen to my parents, in very complicated rhythms. It was very easy for me to repeat anything that people would clap to me, you know. And I came to the music school at the age of 4, and they did the usual test, you know, this. I was like, don't insult my intelligence, please. You know, basically that was the situation. Yeah. So I started playing piano when I was 5, and I started with jazz piano and then classical a bit later. And I studied with this fantastic jazz pianist in Ukraine. He was not your traditional kind of educator. He studied more with much older kids, like from late teens anywhere to 50-year-olds, you know. And I was there, his 5-year-old and then 6-year-old, and he would just sit down and play a bunch of, you know, cool crap, and I would sit down and repeat it. And my mom would be like, can you please slow down? Please play it like 5 notes at a time. And I was like, oh, Mom, okay, I got it. So
oh my goodness.
So that was pretty cool. And then I never practiced until I was about 14. So by the age I was maybe 10, I evened out with other kids. And then I kind of started to suck. So I saw that I needed to practice. So I started practicing, and that was the whole different thing. Yeah, what was the question?
Love it.
So from that, you decided to go into music, or did you have aspirations to go into something else?
So my parents wanted me to do a number of different things which they thought would bring money. I wanted to do music because I felt at that time that even though in Ukraine it's very hard to make money with, I mean, let's face it, anywhere, but in Ukraine especially, it's very hard to make a good living with music. It's not impossible, but it's hard. And but I felt somehow that, you know, first of all, I was good at it. I was, you know, the musical dictations that other kids would struggle to write, I would write them from 2 goes instead of 10 goes, and then I would be done and just sitting there and all that. And also all the studies, even if I didn't practice at home, I had 2 or 3 lessons per week with my teacher, and then solfege and all that. And just wasting all of that, throwing it out after 7 years of music school, which in Ukraine is quite intense, and going and doing something else, I just felt like that was going to be already robbing myself of something. So I insisted on music, and my mom was thinking about maybe choral conducting because that's what they did on their side of the family, and so they had kind of connections in that area. In Ukraine you need to have connections in everything. And my dad was thinking maybe English major, because in Ukraine that was a very good, cool kind of career at that time. Can you imagine if I actually went into English major and then I moved to America with my husband the
Right.
place where English majors are already greatly appreciated.
Yeah.
You know, and I come from English major from Ukraine. Like that would have been just a disaster of a scenario. So I'm really glad that I insisted, and I went to musical college. Yeah, in Ukraine we start pretty early. I was 13 when I started college.
Wow.
13 and a half, yeah. So I did a 5-year degree in jazz and classical piano, and then I got kind of tired of practicing, and I could never really wrap my brain around jazz improvisation well enough to be comfortable with it. Turns out you actually need to practice for that as well, but I didn't.
Yeah.
I just thought that it just comes. I thought it comes, and it's not coming to me, so I need to do something else, you know.
Oh,
And I started composing around that time when I was about 18, and I remember we had a class on with my jazz ensemble, which was part of my curriculum, but it was all my friends at college, you know, we were all mates. And they asked me if I could write a short little tune or two for us to play all together, like write and arrange for that particular setting, just to play at the exam. And I did. And I brought these two pieces to the rehearsal, and we played through them, and they all loved it. You know, it definitely wasn't the best piece ever, but to them it was, because we were in that moment, and I was their friend, and we were 18, you know, and they were so excited about it, and all that excitement from my friends fed back to me. And I was 18, I'm now 39 and a half. And I remember that day, I remember that feeling. And I thought, wow, this is how I want to feel for the rest of my life. So this is how I decided to become a composer from that experience. And so I then entered the conservatory in Ukraine in composition instead of piano, and I keep playing piano, especially concerts with my music. But that's how I decided to switch to composition, and I never looked back, except for when I look inside my wallet. But that's a different story.
Right. That's why your husband makes the real money, right?
Yes.
That's what I have.
I
my
married
wife
well.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yes, quite often people would ask me, oh, so is your husband a musician too? And I say no, because somebody needs to feed the family.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
There's definitely a struggle.
Yeah.
So how was it really difficult to get into the Kyiv Conservatory? I mean, we hear stories like Americans, you know, we grow up on these stories that it's so extremely difficult to get into these European conservatory establishments, and I mean, I don't know what it's like. You know, I went to all state school, so it was like, what is it like that process to go into something like that?
Yeah, it's pretty competitive. There are two, I don't know what it's like now, but when I was applying in 1999 or 2000, it was the situation was that people who applied were basically separated into three groups: the ones who got rejected, the ones who got accepted on but they had to pay for their education, and the ones that got accepted for free. And they were getting a small stipend as well. So for the ones that got accepted for free, the competition was about after the pre-screening and the rejection of the other ones. So just for the free education, it was about 7 composers per spot.
Oh wow.
So yeah, there were 55 people applying, and they accepted 7. So
wow.
7 to 8 composers per spot. Yeah. And I graduated from the musical college summa cum laude. So I didn't have to take, there were 5 exams to get into conservatory, and I only had to take 3 because because summa cum laude covers your 2 exams, like history and and language or something else. But I remember seeing my name there because Kyiv Conservatory is, it has a name, it has history, it has legacy, it's massive. Okay. And I was dreaming about being a student there one day and just thinking about it. And it's also located in downtown Kyiv. It's gorgeous there, very easy commute. That's where everyone wants to be anyway, And then I just remember dreaming about it for years, and then seeing my name there in the list of accepted students. It was just
cool.
Just like I won a jackpot, or
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that was pretty cool. Yeah. And then I went on to I didn't study officially in the US, but I was welcomed to Dana Wilson's composition classes, composition seminar and composers forum, and same with Steve Stuckey at Cornell. So I saw these two schools, and then I saw other schools as I did seminar presentations all across the US pretty much. And Ukrainian education is really good. It's super, the fundamentals are covered really well. You get fantastic basis, base, I guess, foundation for all that you need to learn later on. Mm-hmm. It's all brick by brick, the right bricks in the right places. Yeah. It's really good. Yeah, I'm very fortunate that I had that experience. Because, in the US, basically, the way it worked in Ithaca College, and I think at Cornell, was the composition students, undergrads, had this list of different media that they had to write for their studies. But it was basically up to them in which order to put those. And of course, everybody wanted to start with symphony orchestra. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, this is so cool.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, it's not so cool. It's terrifying unless you know. Yeah. Whereas in Ukraine, first year, you're writing for one or two instruments, and you're writing a simple tertiary form. Or you learn to, like, miniatures and stuff. You learn to create the material. And you learn about the instruments. And then second year, it's rondo and sonata. So you learn to develop the material. And then third year, and variations, rondo, sonata, and variations. And third year, you add instruments. So it's chamber ensemble, chamber orchestra, string orchestra. And then fourth and fifth year, you're working with symphony orchestra.
Well, that's such a fantastic way to do that. I went to a state school, University of Montana, and it was like your first year was structured like that, where it was like, okay, you're gonna write for one or two instruments, and then it was like year two, it was like being thrown to the wolves. It was like, all right, pick what you want and do your thing. Yeah. You get 3 more years of that, and you're like, okay. And then your fourth year, they let you write for a orchestra. Like, I don't know, I just remember being like overwhelmed and terrified. Yeah. Like, I need structure, I need somebody to tell me what to do, this is too much.
Yeah, exactly, because you already have all these choices, all these notes staring at you. You actually want to be put into some box.
Yes. And I never thought I would say that, but yeah, about year two, I was like, can you just tell me what to do?
Yeah, like you need a crib. You need a crib. You get into that crib and you play with these toys. You don't want to be left in the middle of the street playing with these toys. Right?
It's so true.
Yeah. Yeah. So Ukraine had very good structure with that. I really appreciated it later on, because I saw a lot of students being very talented but getting very confused with what to do. And it's like, yay, I chose to write for symphony orchestra. Oh hell, I'm only 19. Why did I do that?
Oh yeah. At where I got my undergrad, it was we write what we wanted, but then we had an actual reading with the symphony, and they were like, first off, we never put them in 6 flats. So second off, well, these solo lines and these, like, the duets are really cool, but you can't, don't subject these people to this, and don't do this. And it's like, I don't know, you know.
Yeah, I remember having a similar experience with my reading. I remember, like, I think I started like the oboes on their lowest note, and the guy was just like, "No," I was like, "Oh, okay, I didn't know." Never written an oboe and all these other instruments.
What do you mean the English horn can't go that high? Just go harder. You know? Like...
Yeah, and it's really scary, you know. Now when saxophone undergrads are playing in the band, playing through my piece, and they say, actually saxophone can't do it, and I say, actually it can, and actually many people have done it. It's up on YouTube, you know. Oh, they're like, oh, okay, you know. But you know, when you know your stuff. But it's scary. I remember my violin sonata when I was a year 3 student at the conservatory. And I wrote the sonata for violin and piano, and I brought it to the violin performance major and asked her to read through it together. And she looks at the first bar and she says, "Well, that's unplayable." And I'm like, "It's the first bar." And she said, "Well, yeah, life is cruel. What do you want me to say? It's unplayable." And luckily it was the only bar that was unplayable. So I had a double stop, and it was low G and C sharp, and obviously that can't happen because the next string is D. So
just tune the D down a little bit. It's fine.
But that's the thing, you know. This is the brilliant example. This is the brilliant example of knowing of why you need to know stuff about instruments, not just from Wikipedia, you know, because you look at the range and it's from low G. So you assume that you can use anything from that low G and onwards.
Right.
But actually, yes, but also you need to think about the strings, and you can't use low G with anything lower than D.
Right.
You know. So so that was my first embarrassing moment of many.
Hey, it was how we learn.
Yeah. Can we cut this out? No, I'm joking.
Well, I remember we had right. I remember we had Eric Whitaker visit our school when I was in my master's, and we were playing his piece, "The Steel Lullaby," and like I was playing the piano part because I was the designated pianist, and he was like, he walks up, stands right next to the piano, and he's like, "So, how's it going?" And I was like, "This is actually a little more difficult than I anticipated," you know. And you know, part of it was like we weren't giving it enough like ebb and flow, and he's got these kind of awkward jumps from the low to the upper range, and you can't just go boom bam, you know, you can't jump and land hard, and I hadn't been performing in I don't know, a couple years, so it was just like I wasn't used to it anymore. So, but it was interesting to talk to him about it, and it felt weird saying like, well, if it was me, I would have done it this way, you know.
You're
Eric Whitaker, so you can do what you want.
Right.
Yeah. That was probably not the best place to talk about it. Yeah.
Right.
But having said that, you know, it's with piano writing, I just that's kind of one of the reasons that I stick to performing my own music. It's a twofold kind of effect. One is that I know that, you know, no matter how, one of the reasons I didn't want to keep going was the piano performance was that, you know, there is this crazy competition that everybody's trying to be better than everyone else. And then there is a 5-year-old prodigy coming out of Asia somewhere and you're screwed, you know? And that's just, and like, you have to be better than everyone else playing this concerto by Mozart. I don't even want to listen to that concerto by Mozart. Who cares? You know?
I love it.
How am I supposed to be better than Yuzha Wang and Ling Ling? I mean, that's not going to happen, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And with composition and with playing my own music, like I know that there are lots of people in the world who are better pianists than me on the large scale of things. But I also know that ultimately no one can really perform that piano part better than I can because I know so much more about it than I can put in the score, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's one side of it. And another side of it is when I perform other people's music quite often, when it's new music and they're just sending it off and it sounds easy on the MIDI, so they think it's easy, but it's just not quite playable. It's just this weird stuff. And then quite often in atonal music, people would use double sharps and double flats.
Yeah.
And I'm just knock it off. It's not like, by definition, there is no key in your music. If there is no key, there can't be double sharps and double flats.
Right.
Because
right.
they are the side effect of key signatures.
Exactly.
And when we are in a minor key, I understand the need for double sharps. That's how it should be, okay, in some situations. But when we are in atonal music, there's absolutely no need for them. That's one of the good things about atonal music. So
free.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So that's but I found as a pianist and as a composer educator, I guess, I found that piano music is one of the hardest things for a lot of composers to get right, and people will tell you there is no right or wrong. To a certain point, and then there actually is.
If you want to perform, there is.
Like there are these I've played this Sonata 40 by David Sampson, which is a great piece. The version for horn and piano I played it was Adam Unsworth from University of Michigan. We played it numerous times, and it's hell to learn, really fun to play. But there are these moments that on piano just don't quite work well. There are these very long notes, like very long chords that last a long, long time. And after that, there is a melody that's supposed to be loud, but it kind of comes as the continuation of the chord that just faded. So it feels like that chord needs to build, except it starts fading straight away.
You're always in the on the piano.
So I feel very fortunate that I'm a pianist who became a composer, and so I know how to write for piano. That's
it's valuable. I know I have like limited piano, and every time I sit to write piano for whatever, I'm like, this is not my strong suit, and I'm always like err on the side of like, is it playable? Like, please let me
that's good. That's good, as long as you're thinking about it, and that's pretty much all you have to do. And if you are being on the side of being careful with it, that's fine. That's how I write for harp. I always make harp parts easy to put together, easy to read, because I know that quite often they just have to read them, and they also have to see the conductor, and it's just hell. Harp equals hell. So so I'm very careful with it, and I can use 4 different notes, but I try to create as much magic as I can with those 4 notes. So it's kind of quite fun, but when you look at it, there is not much to it at all. I've been able to get away with it so far. We'll see how much I can milk it for how much longer. Nobody knows. I have 2022 in the pool. We'll see.
And so then from Kiev, you went to the University of Queensland. Is that correct?
No, so from Kyiv, we went to the US, we went to Ithaca, and then to Chicago, and then, in terms of education, in terms of official university education, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, so who did you study with at the University of Queensland?
I studied with, so I didn't study with anyone for my composing, because between the two, I already did 8 years of freelancing, and I recorded several albums and did performances and all that. But I did study for my thesis for my PhD research. For that, I studied with the local composer Robert Davidson for the first couple of years, and then I changed my principal advisors. Long story. And then I studied with a piano professor, Liam Boyney, who is a current head of school here. And I changed the lens at which through which I was looking at my research, and rewrote my thesis completely. And so I basically did 1.5 theses, I guess.
Oh my goodness.
And then I finished, and I'm so happy and so relieved about it.
Oh yeah, and that was recently too, right?
It was recently, and it took me a while because I was full-time composer. You're allowed here to accept any commissions and anything you want while you're studying.
Oh, cool.
So I was a full-time composer and doing casual teaching quite often, and being a full-time, half-time, part-time mom as well. My husband is also full-time mom, so that was quite busy. I was accepted into the program in April 2013, and my daughter was born in August 2013.
Wow.
Oh, okay.
So it was a long process, and and I wanted my thesis to be perfect for me, every word, and that was annoying and took a while. But then it was ultimately worth it because it was accepted without any recommended changes.
So it's fantastic.
Yeah, and here in Australia the situation is different with this from what it is in the US. You have your oral exam and you have your other qualifications, but then to analyze your thesis you actually need to find outside examiners. They can be from within your country or they can be international. So I got myself 2 international examiners, one of whom had never heard my name. Well, maybe he heard my name, but he knew nothing about my work. And everybody said that I was crazy to take such a massive risk. And I said, well, I don't really care whether or not I get this PhD. I have this typical composer, I have this chance. I have this chance of putting my music in front of somebody who's never experienced it, and asking them what they think and my work, and they have no perspective because they don't know who I am, so they will not be partial in any way. I really want that to happen, so that was very risky, but it worked. And now that person and I are gonna do a little bit of collaboration, which is exciting. Yeah. So that was that.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
And what is your thesis on?
Here your composition thesis has to be about your kind of either your compositional process or a specific piece that you're planning to write. At first, when you're applying, you need to tell them what you think your thesis will be about. Okay. So at first I was planning to write scraps from Madman's Diary, and I was planning to just make scraps my thesis. But then in the process, as things were coming up, and I started analyzing my premeditated improvisation, which is the term that I coined as part of my thesis. So I thought it was free improvisation that I was using for my composing, but then I analyzed it and I saw that it was actually not all that free, because I was thinking about it for ages, and it's like this piece for 5 horns that I'm improvising on. I'm improvising on piano, but it doesn't sound like piano music. It sounds like music for some other instruments and all that. So lots of analysis went into it. And my thesis ended up being on this premeditated improvisation as part of the compositional process, and as the connector, as the bridge between subconsciousness and conscious decisions.
Wow.
So that's basically the main thing, and the biggest chapter of it is about scraps from Madman's Diary. But I also talk about my horn works and my recent orchestral piece, Rituals of Heartland, and do a little case study, and I submitted my improvisations that are supposed to be just for me, but it's thesis you kind of have to share, and and my vocal improvisation for my horn piece. I threw a shoe at the cat, and it's all like it's all really. It's fun stuff, when I'm just singing and meowing just for myself, but then I have to put it out there. It's literally the recording where I'm singing meow, meow, and I turned it into a piece. Yeah. It was the piece about this cat. But then this recording, this meowing, is there as part of my thesis, and it's all, but it's also it's fun. It's kind of method in madness, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the madness side, and there is also the methods described. Yeah.
I love it.
I love your scraps for A Madman's Diary.
Thank you.
I've listened to it a couple times, quite a few times actually, and it's just like I just wrote these notes where it's such a cool mix of like, at least the version I saw was like this live action, with a regular standard choir, and then it's like there's another choir in front of it, and then the conductor, and then the ensemble on the other side of the conductor, almost musical theater in a way. That piece come about?
Thank you for watching, and I'm glad you enjoyed it. It's like I said, there are no short stories with Likhuta, so
that's okay.
In 2006, and I promise not to go through every year between then and now, but in 2006 I read this unassuming little novel by Nikolai Gogol, Ukrainian author, called Diary of a Madman. It was just a 10-page story, and it was describing from the first person, describing a person's descent into insanity. And I read it overnight, and I was just completely blown away, because it was this tiny little nucleus, and the charge inside it, the dramatic charge, was ridiculous. In the first sentence, he talks about coming to work and kind of his colleagues making a bit fun of him, and you don't quite understand why. And then at the end of page 10, he's locked up in an insane asylum.
Wow.
And I was just completely blown away, but I also felt uneasy about how much potential I felt one could extrapolate from that idea. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't developed. It wasn't meant to develop, to be developed, but I wanted to develop it. And I told my husband, one day I will write an oratory about it. And he was like, yeah, go to sleep. Okay. So I was like, I'll show you. So I had this idea about writing this piece for ages. And but I felt that I wasn't ready yet, and I also wanted to have the performers who would be willing to do it. I couldn't just write it and let it sit. I needed to write it for someone, this driving force for my creativity. And so when I moved to Australia, I started making contacts here. Cindy Johnston Turner, who commissioned my piano concerto at Cornell, she then moved to UGA, and she wanted, a year before she moved to UGA, she wanted to commission another piece from me. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to write this. I wanted to write scraps. And she said, great, but it has to be we need probably a 12-minute piece or so. She wanted scraps, but she wanted a 12-minute piece as well. And I said, no, it's not going to fit. At that time, I wanted to make it a 20-minute concerto variations without any text. A choir, but no text. Okay. And just to do the idea of blooming mental illness, do it through the form of variations and the mutations with the musical material. And so I wrote Me Disagrees for Cindy Johnston Turner at that time instead, and I kept the idea of scraps for later. And then when I applied for grad school and I found the conductor here who did Me Disagrees and who wanted to do this piece, as soon as I described it to him, he said, "We're in."
Oh, cool.
And please tell me how much money we need to pay for this. I'm going to go apply for funding. And I was like, maybe I'll apply for a grant. He said, no, you take care of the creative part. We want to pioneer this project. Okay.
Oh, so wow. What a dream.
That was amazing. Yeah. And he was buzzing about it. I was buzzing about it. And he's immense support all of a sudden to just a local composer who just moved here. You know, his faith in me really inspired me. And within a week, I messaged him and I said, could it be not a 20-minute concerto variations, but a 35-minute, like a 35-minute oratorio? And by the way, I have libretto ideas and some text. And it just all kind of grew legs. My brain was just coming up with all this stuff, like all the text. I wrote it all myself. Wow. And then the ideas for the and you know, I'm not claiming that it's good or whatever. It's good for me. But I'm just saying that I did it all myself. And then these dramatic elements, the acting and staging, and where they stand and how they're dressed and all that all was coming to me as well. The structure of the 13 scenes was partly just me thinking, okay, holy crap, I'm about to write a 35-minute piece and I've never written anything longer than 13 minutes. You know, how do I deal with it? And I just decided, how about we deal with it one scene at a time? That's going to be good safety blanket, you know? So just thinking about a million different considerations, how we hear this, how we hear that, how, you know, not having any text for the choir after scene 8 where they tear their diaries apart, so they don't have to memorize much stuff. You know, just all these things. It was crazy. It was such a crazy compositional and otherwise process. It was quite an out of the body experience, really. And also the immense pressure for the world premiere. I knew that it was this conservatorium that commissioned it, with the consortium support from Sydney Conservatorium and University of Georgia. But the conservatorium, Queensland Conservatorium here in Brisbane, that commissioned it, it was at that time their biggest commission.
Wow.
And so I was like, no pressure, you know.
Right.
And then I would come, and I would come to that concert hall where they would have concerts, symphony orchestra and wind ensemble, and I would come there as I was writing the piece. And I would just think, the little voice in my head would be, don't stuff it up, because this is the concert hall. It's amazing. It's massive. Lots of, like, it fits, I don't remember, like over 1,000 people. And and it's the world premiere, you know, it's the first go at the piece. So you really need everything to be perfect. So it was intense, but it was amazing.
Just love how it seems so, you know, in the beginning it seems so natural and yet it's still like a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And then how it just devolves into this literally just a person sitting there on the floor and everyone just like pointing at them and you know, the yelling and stuff. I was just like, wow, I've never seen anything done like this especially with a wind ensemble.
Yeah.
You know? This is like, whenever I see something like this, I'm thinking maybe like David Little or something, you know, like an opera or, you know, at least, you know, like an orchestra or something, but I've never really seen anything like that with a wind ensemble. How did you pick? I mean, is that just what you thought of rather than an orchestra or?
Yeah, they offered me both choices. I could have done it with symphony orchestra or wind ensemble, but I really love the colors and the power of wind ensemble. And due to my jazz background, I feel closer to wind ensemble. Mind you, first time I heard wind ensemble, I was 26.
Oh, wow. Okay.
There's no wind ensemble in Ukraine. And I didn't really travel outside Ukraine until I moved to the US. So my first experience with wind ensemble was when I asked Dana Wilson to give me a CD with a bunch of his music so that I can get introduced to it. And he burned the CD for me, and he put, you know, a healthy mix of everything. And there were several of his wind ensemble pieces, and I didn't know what it was. I was just listening to it one by one. Yeah. And I was like, this is a really cool orchestral piece. I love the groove and everything. But man, this guy just doesn't know how to write for strings. I can't hear that. Turns out there was no freaking strings there. It was wind ensemble. And so that was my first introduction to wind ensemble. And then my next introduction to wind ensemble was pretty much when I was writing for Cornell in 2008 for Cornell wind ensemble. And I just feel like in terms of the attack and the articulation and the timing of the attack and the articulation, it's much easier for me to work with them on the on the more picky scale of things. Yeah. Then with symphony orchestra, and also symphony orchestras are not really that interested in new music. I love writing. Oh, yeah. I love writing for symphony orchestras, but I had to turn down several commissions because no matter how much you get paid, no composer ever wants to write a piece that will be performed just once. Right. So, yeah. And look, Scraps is the piece that's not gonna get heaps of performances because it takes such massive forces to perform it. But I know that there are people who are really committed to it and who have it on their bucket list, and people who are waiting for the right moment for some schools are waiting for the new choral conductor to come in next year or a couple of years from now, where they can put it together. People are making these plans, and that's fine. I didn't even think that it would be performed the second. Like, I didn't kind of care whether it would be performed the second time. I had to write it anyway. Yeah. I was just so pregnant with it, so to speak. I just had to write it. And when I was at University of Georgia for so they brought me over from Australia for a week-long residency for their North American premiere of Scraps. That's the one that's the video that you're talking about, Bill. And the first notes started coming out of the stage, and we were preparing for it for a week, and they were absolutely brilliant. They were so on top of things when I came. And when I heard the first couple of notes, my thought, I remember it so clearly, my thought was, holy hell, it's being performed again. Oh, yeah. It's like, yeah. Because I thought, even if it's never gets performed, I'm so glad that I wrote it. I had to and all that. But then it was getting performed again. It was awesome. I hope it gets performed again sometime soon. Me too. once we finish with COVID. And, it was also a very kind of cleansing experience for a lot of students. The students who were working on it here with me, it was different for them because they saw bits and pieces being composed. I would bring them to reading sessions. So they didn't have this same holistic experience with it.
Right.
just getting this finished product, and seeing it. They were kind of part of this whole journey. But then when UGA students were working with it, they were coming to the conductors and talking to them and saying, can we talk, and telling them the stories about how somebody in their life suffers from mental illness. And then, after the performance, I went backstage with them, and several of them were just crying and giving me hugs. And this one girl came and she was just in tears, and I was like, oh, I'm so sorry, sweetheart. And she said, no, this is not, I'm not sad. I don't know how to describe it. But she said, I was never in the room full of people who cared about this, and I remembered it because it was so powerful. And so, I think we don't talk about it in the arts nearly enough, about mental illness, mental health, and the perception that we have in the society still. It's 21st century, but still so many people think it's funny when somebody's visibly mentally ill. They giggle and whatnot. And so I use that opportunity also kind of to manipulate the audience, in scene 3 with puppy dogs, and making it all funny and giggly, and then calendar people later on, but then turning it to its very dark side. And these people feel guilty that they laughed about it in scene 3 and in scene 5. And I want them to feel guilty, because that's it's the different sides of the same situation.
That's powerful.
So
and it has a lot of feelings to me of it reminded me a lot of Corel Husa, and just the way you orchestrated things, and the way the voices and the timbres work together. I keep referring to this, and I referred to it in another episode we had, but of his apotheosis, and it's just kind of so dramatic, and the way you wrote for the brass and the low brass especially, and yet the timpani had its moments, and it wasn't just blending in and things. It was great. It was such a beautiful piece. And the piano solos, you had these little piano solos in there that made time kind of stand still, and I loved it.
Thank you. And it was also my first time writing for choir, so no pressure.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I was going to ask you if you'd ever written for choir before.
No, my brain was like, first time writing for choir. I was like, shut up. Let's keep going.
We can do this. Don't blow this.
Yeah, and I'm also terrible. I have 0, which is bad, but I have kind of 0. I don't know. I don't want to say 0 interest, but I was not... it never attracted me to do score studies, and I like listening to music, and that's why when Cindy Johnston Turner asked me to write my piano concerto, I just went to all of their wind band rehearsals for the entire semester, 3 times a week.
Wow.
I was there. And I was just writing like, clarinets sound really good with xylophone when they're doing this and the xylophone is playing the same thing in the octave. I just had this like book, like a text kind of, you know,
like a notebook.
or
Yeah.
records,
Yeah.
that I was keeping from all these rehearsals. I'm not sure I ever read it, but as I was writing it, it was kind of somehow getting uploaded in here. Yeah, and that's how I learned. But I didn't study any scores ever. I think maybe it's because in Ukraine we didn't really have access to any scores. You could hardly borrow anything from the library back then. So it was all just hearing and trying and seeing what works. So yeah, it's hard. There is never like, I can never do like, oh, I know this formula will work. No, I don't know it because I haven't tried it before, but it's also fun, kind of.
Yeah,
that's part of the mystery and the joy of trying.
Yeah, takes some courage, that's for sure.
Yeah. Oh.
And then the first rehearsal is always like, I really hope it sounds like it sounds in my head.
Yeah.
Not like a moment where you hear it and you're like, okay, I wasn't crazy. Like this came out the way I was hoping it would.
Yeah. Yeah, lately it's been working. Yeah, I even with scraps I had to change like just a couple of notes in each scene, and everything else just worked. I think it's just because I kept reminding myself how important it was that everything works.
Yeah. Well, that
I also
detail makes it enjoyable as a performer when you've got that intention from the composer, and they've clearly spent time thinking about, okay, how does the performer going to deal with this? Like, what are their aches and pains? What are they going to moan about? And that's great.
Yeah, and I was also, while I was orchestrating it, I wrote short score first, and then while I was orchestrating it, I had atypical pneumonia for 10 weeks. I had high-grade fever every day for 10 weeks while I was orchestrating it, and yeah, so it was an experience to remember in every way.
Yeah. Wow. Takes writing in a fever to a whole new level.
Yes.
Tap into Mozart, right?
So, yeah. Yeah.
Berlioz write that one in a night.
Yeah. I know. Yeah, I don't think I've ever written anything in a night. One of the funniest kind of or most ironic stories about my music is this. So I wrote this piece for clarinet and piano, started it in 2005, and I finished it in 2007. And that was the piece I was writing when I started working with Dana Wilson. And then I was finishing it when I started working with Steve Stuckey. And then we did the premiere of that piece. And that's the one that Cindy Johnston Turner heard live and asked me to write piano concerto for them. And so I played with it. So she liked it. And then I came back to my lesson with Steve Stuckey, and I said, look, I'm worried that, you know, if it takes me 2 years to write each piece. And he said, well, first of all, it depends on what kind of piece. You know, Lutoslavsky took once like 11 years to write something. And he was Lutoslavsky's student. Lutoslavsky coached him, kind of like he coached me. Yeah. And he said, and he said, well, it's also, so if you pop out pieces like Motions, that piece that I wrote every 2 years, you shouldn't worry. But then he also said, look, if you want to practice writing faster, take some idea and do these exercise pieces. Commit to writing one piece a day, like very short piece, like take someone's name and take the notes out of the letters and write just one piece in a day, and then you're done. And I decided to do that, and I took the perfect fifths and its inversion, and I worked on it for a day, and I loved it. And then the day was gone, but I was like, well, I like this idea, and you know, I feel like coming up with a good idea is the hardest part. Then you can work with it because you have the craft skills, you know. So I decided not to give it up, but I was working on the piano concerto, so I was getting back to this idea on and off. So that turned out into my piece called Insolent Shadow, and it took, from the day I started it to the day I put the double bar at the end, it took 2 years.
Wow.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that, though. I feel like you really get that time to let it breathe, and think on it.
Yeah, it's just funny. It's just funny that was that was supposed to be a 1-day exercise piece.
Yeah.
Just 1 day, 2 years later.
Yeah, exactly. So
Cool.
So while Scraps hasn't had a lot of performances, your piece Home Away from a Home I feel like it's been performed everywhere almost.
Almost, yeah. I'm happy for as many people to perform it as possible. I'm quite excited about that piece.
And now that piece is about Ukraine, is that correct?
Oh, it's about a whole bunch of places. It's basically about the idea. It was commissioned for the slightly younger performers than Scraps and then my other works. So for freshmen and sophomore to junior undergrads in college. And so my idea was that, to relate to that age group, because it was the first time that I was writing for that particular age group. And I wanted to kind of recreate the feeling of when they leave home for the first time and they move to college and all the feelings that are associated with it. It's kind of like taking off on the airplane,
Yeah.
I mean, different people take off on an airplane in different ways. Like my husband does it like this. But he falls asleep before, these people. I
always envy. I can't.
Yeah, I know.
Like 10-hour flight. I'm like, well, I'm here for the entire thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. When I flew to
Yeah.
When I flew to Paris, I had to go from Houston to Istanbul to Venice to Paris, and literally was up the entire time. Yep. I just couldn't sleep at all.
So I did Montana to Minneapolis, and then Minneapolis to Paris. And I remember getting there, and there were some people from New York that were like, it was like a 5-hour flight. And I'm like, I've been up for 20 hours.
Yeah. What day is it? I'm on day 3.
Yeah.
So there are two kinds of people. So I'm very much like Hillary. Yeah, I just can't sleep, and I feel that when the engine starts, I feel like, what's gonna happen? Are we gonna crash?
It's so true. I'm hang tight, and then when we're in the air, I'm like, okay. Yeah,
but it's also exciting, this feeling. So that was kind of the idea for the beginning, and then for the sentimental section, it was about or melancholic. It was about this feeling for when you visit a place where you had loved ones in the past, and now they passed away, and you come there for the first time, and you just visit that place. And then there is this Ukrainian section, just because it's Ukrainian, it's fun, so I incorporated a bit of that. But it's basically about all these different places and just the feeling of having a home somewhere, home away from home.
Yeah.
Because I don't know where my home is anymore and where my home away from home is. Ithaca is my home. Chicago is a bit of my home. Ukraine is my home, and Australia is my home.
Yeah.
So
it's all. To
that. Yeah.
Texas, Montana. I lived in England for a year, and I'm like, all of these places are home to me.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, and the more we move towards the very globalized kind of world, the more people can relate to it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And how did you incorporate, I guess this is kind of just an overall question about all your pieces, but like incorporate your Ukrainian heritage into your music?
Yeah, I don't really even know how it happens until like I just decide to kind of turn up the volume on my Ukrainian heritage while composing, and then I'm like, oh, that sounds good. But I don't analyze any folk music or anything like that. It's all kind of what I have in me.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of it is open fifths and gutsy, kind of really robust with lowered second, this kind of motion towards tonic, then da 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 da, this sort of thing, and it just kind of has this tribal feel to it, and I just go with that and find it musically.
Yeah,
all that. Yeah.
It's fun when you have those styles like ingrained in you, and you're just like you're problem solving, and you're like, oh, I could use a little bit of this, and like
yeah. I'm just letting it out, and it's also it's really fun because it's also like, how many composers do you know who come from Ukraine and are writing for band and or any other medium, and who is gonna give you that little sample of that culture. And I feel like I should give you that sample of that culture, because that culture is awesome. And even though I'm not giving you something that I can classify, I can describe why exactly it's Ukrainian folk, because there is very little literature on it. I tried to find it for my thesis. It's very little, but I feel like it's genuine because it's coming from, because I lived it,
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Kathy, Dr. Likhuta. I don't know what you want us to call you, but
yes, Dr. Kathy.
Dr. Kathy, perfect. I love it. Thank you so much for being on. We really appreciate it. We love your music, and I can't wait to hear more when you have more coming out.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me and for your interest and your questions and for listening to all my answers and being patient.
Yes, thanks for giving us the whole story, not just what you think we wanted.
Yeah. My pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Sounds of the World podcast. We hope you enjoyed the episode. There are links to everything in the episode description and also on our website.
You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Sounds of the World. Show support for Sounds of the World podcast. Please join our Patreon, where you can have access to our after-party discussions with guests, discounted merchandise, and even more.
If you have any questions, answers, or episode suggestions, please email us at soundsoftheworldpodcast@gmail.com. Well, Bill, I think I'm going to go have a beer now.
Hey, there you go.